Hi YouTube and Blade Forums, this is John here again. Right now I'm back with a comparison review of the Benchmade 940-1 and the Benchmade Valet. Right now these are two of my favorite knives. The 940-1 has been my favorite knife since I got it almost 2 years ago now. The Valet I only got just recently, and it kicked my Delica out of the number 2 spot. So I've been very happy with the Valet so far. I like it because it's a smaller version of the 940. I just love everything about the 940-1 except for the size of the blade, because it's a little bit longer than would be considered polite, I would say. It's something that you don't want to pull out in all areas because it's a little bit on the long side. It's not aggressive looking, but it's just something that you have to be careful with in an office environment or around people who aren't used to seeing knives. But I feel like the Valet I think it can pass off as a gentleman's knife because it has a beautiful, almost wood grain like pattern on the G10. It's a light color. It's not an aggressive color. It's a very neutral color, and it has a very nice fluid shape on the knife blade here. I think it's a really beautiful shape on the blade. And if you close the Valet and open it with two hands, I don't think you're going to call very much attention because it's really not much larger than your standard traditional folding knife, pocket knife. Okay, so the Benchmade 940, quite a bit larger. You're talking about a almost 3.5 inch blade on here compared to a 3-inch blade on here. Under 3 inches here, this will be legal in almost every county and city throughout the United States. San Francisco has very tight knife laws. There's a 3-inch limit, so this makes that requirement. This one does not. So if you want to avoid legal issues, this one will be permitted in more areas than this one. However, overall, this one I find to be the better cutter. With the almost 3.5 inch blade length, I find that is more useful for more tasks. It's better for outdoor tasks, and it's better for indoor tasks. With the Valet size blade here, as with the Delica size blades, I find that these sizes are sufficient for everything from cutting cardboard, cutting string and thread, to even, small sizes of rope. Small gauges of rope. The only place I find the 3-inch blade lacking is when it comes to cutting and preparing food. For food prep, 3 inches just doesn't really cut it very well. You can get by, but even just cutting a standard size apple, you run into problems because it starts to run into the thumb stud here. It makes it difficult to get the cut through in one cut. Whereas the 940, when I'm in the kitchen, I feel like I have a paring knife in my hand here. Because at 3.5 inches, this works great as a paring knife. I can cut through an apple, I can cut through an onion, through a tomato. I can slice, green onions, for instance. While at the same time, it also functions pretty well as a sandwich knife. It almost kind of functions as a butter knife. I can spread, mayonnaise and mustard really easy with this thing, and then I can cut the sandwich up when I'm done. Cut it in half. This thing, it does very well in the kitchen. And to me, that is like the quintessential EDC knife. One that does everything at least decently well. And to me, this does the outdoor stuff well, it does the office stuff well, it cuts open boxes well, and it works good with food prep and cutting produce. This is a knife that you can very well use for your lunchtime. This one will work, but not as much. You're going to end up finding yourself getting a lot of food into the pivot here and behind the thumb stud. And that's not a knock on this knife. It's just 3-inch blades just don't really cut it for the food prep. So that's where this really excels. So if this size doesn't bother you and you're not worried about it offending anyone, this is the one I would go with. But this one has its place. I think this might even be a good secondary knife to have to the Benchmade 940. It's the one you can take when you're going out to a nice dinner at a nice restaurant, or when you're going to a dinner party and you're going to be in polite company. It's something that you can pull out without scaring anyone, but it's still long enough to be useful. Differences here, you have carbon fiber versus G10. I think this G10 looks better for me personally, but this carbon fiber is lighter. And it's very strong. I've dropped this on concrete. I've had no issues. Just a slight little tiny chip. You can't even see it unless you're in the right light and you're carefully looking for it. Furthermore, on here, the 940 has the better the clip, in my opinion. It goes in the pocket easier, and it has the pocket retention is really good, about equal to here. They're both open back knives here. The pocket knives are both open, so they're both very easy in maintenance. This has full stainless steel liners, however, so it really makes this a tough little guy. This one here, if you can see on the inside, it has partial steel liners. Okay, they go back maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the length of the knife handle. But it has enough metal where it counts, which is right here on the front. And so there is no blade play on this knife. On the Valet, there's just a very slight amount. But if you're going lightly, you don't feel anything. You have to kind of really jiggle it to feel it. Okay. So while this one has two anodized aluminum standoffs, this one here has a G10 backspacer right here. This really is there mostly to function as a grip for when you're opening and closing the knife, and to give you a little bit more traction when you're making cuts. Okay? Because on this knife, if you'll notice, there's no jimping here, not on the top and not on the bottom. There's a little notch here for helping opening with the thumb stud, but it also doubles as a little finger catch here. On your 940-1, you do have the jimping, so this is more conducive to heavier duty cutting. This is probably the better knife to take with you hiking or camping. It's going to do better for outdoors just because it's going to be more grippy, and it has a more substantial finger guard here, so you're less likely to slip over the blade. Okay. Shape of the handle, this one is also going to be more ergonomic. It's obvious though, it's a full-size knife and it has a really nice palm swell there, so it really fits well in the palm of your hand. This one here, it's a very straight handle, very plain, very neutral. It has a slight swell but nothing significant. It's not the most ergonomic knife, but it's not uncomfortable either. Okay, so as you can see, the hand takes up quite a bit of the handle, and I have a medium hand. If you have a large hand, you might be getting kind of close to the blade or having your pinky go off the back end here. On the knives here, they're both kind of sharp. I've used them right now. They were sharpened a little while ago. But my standard sharpness test after I'm done sharpening is cutting a paper towel. The S90V on the 940-1 is a very aggressive cutting steel. Even when it starts to feel a little bit dull, it's still able to make good cuts. Okay. So now here is the Valet Benchmade. Okay, so this is after I've done several cuts as well. It goes for the paper towel still, not bad. Okay, here's your phone book paper, which no one uses phone books anymore, I guess, but here it is. You can see it cuts through there still. The front has more use on it because I cut maybe 30, close to 40 pieces of sisal rope on there. But you can see it's still cutting through. The M390 holds the razor edge really well. It holds the razor edge better than the S90, although the S90 does hold the overall edge longer. So there's the S90V. The S90V, I haven't really used this very much since I sharpened it. Just a few cuts on the tip, a few cuts of sisal rope, maybe less than 6 or 7. So it cuts that really well. And now here's where both of these knives do well. It's in precision cuts. Something that Spyderco has troubles with, because a lot of Spyderco blades, like the Sage here, is very thick in the front. So you can see you can't get into that little loop I've made here. You see that? That's going to be a very difficult cut. Whereas with this one, it actually fits, you know? So, and that cuts it. That was a really small loop, by the way. I could barely hold on to it. And see, 940-1, it also goes through here. But being a more aggressive cutting edge, it goes with the rope with less pressure. Plus you have more blade length to slide on, so you get, a little bit better cutting action, a little bit better slicing action. Now just here's a little piece of cardboard. Again, it really feels like I'm using a paring knife when I'm doing this. It just feels so natural. Okay, now here's the Valet. The Valet gets through the cardboard with a little bit less resistance, and that's what you would expect from a thin blade stock. The blade stock on this bad boy here is 0.099 inches, okay? The blade stock on your 940-1, I believe is 0.115, I believe, just slightly under 0.12 of an inch, okay? So still a very thin stock. They both taper down decently. A lot better than on the ZT. The ZT to me seems more like a wedge. than a nice slicing knife, although the ZT does make good cuts. So as far as grip, this is definitely the win. As far as the knife blade shape, this is the win for usability. This one though, it's a beautiful knife, and I think it functions better for urban carry. I think if you're going to be out and about though, and you're doing food prep with your knife, I think you're going to find more use for the 940-1 overall. To me, the only downside on the 940-1 is the length of the blade, and that's it. I don't personally have an issue with it, but it is getting on the large size for carrying in urban environments, especially you know, in big cities, you know. So the finishes on the blades here, this one is more of a stonewash finish on the 940, and I can estimate that they might have done this because the S90V is so hard to sharpen. So it doesn't have as fine of a finish as the Valet does. The Valet has a very nice and smooth satin finish. It's just silky smooth when you run your finger over it. And plus the M390 is going to be more rust resistant overall. It has a lot more chromium in it. You're talking about 20% chromium. And this steel is highly reflective. When you see it in person, I mean, you can see the reflection. You can see skin colors and everything on here. It's almost like a mirror underneath the satin finish. So really, the only downside on the Valet is the small mechanics of it, the small thumb studs and the small axis lock, and also the small clip. It's just a size down 940 as far as I see it. And with sizing down comes, you know, a little bit of troubles as far as everything working the same. There's obviously some sacrifices involved, but overall I like it. Also, another little fine detail on here is the backside of their bolts here. It has a really nice kind of frosted concentric ring design, and it just looks... Sorry, I cut out there. If I could only have one knife overall, it would be probably the 940-1. But if I'm more in an office environment, I'd probably consider this one. So 940-1 would be my first choice, and this would be my second choice. They're both very close, and as far as I'm concerned with all my knives, this is number 1 and this is number 2. The Delica moved to the third spot seat. So both of these carry great in the pocket, and to me, that's one of the greatest strengths. I use the term everyday carry versus everyday user. If you're someone who does everyday carry, you're someone like me who how it carries in the pocket is very important, but you still want something that cuts very well. To me, everyday carry is something that it's mostly in the pocket, but you might pull it out maybe 1 or 2 times a day, you know, maybe not more than a dozen or so times a week. To me, an everyday user is something that's more heavy duty, something that's meant for cutting, you know, several dozen times a day. So for everyday carry, to me, the most important thing is that it stays small in the pocket and that it's easy to take out, deploy it, and put it back. And that's one of the big strengths of the Benchmade. You can take it out, deploy it, and close it and put it back. All in one motion, and without getting your fingers in the path of the closing blade because of the axis lock design. So that's that. For the everyday user class, I would classify that more as like a Spyderco Paramilitary 2, or even maybe the Sage 3, just on the fancier end of that. Because this thing has really good ergonomics for long time cutting, for doing many cuts per day, and it has good edge geometry as well. But it doesn't have the fine precision point that the two Benchmates have. So, and that's why overall these are my 2 favorite knives right now. And this is something I would recommend to anyone. So that's it for the review. Let me know what you guys think. Leave any comments if you want. And thank you very much for watching, guys. Bye.